I want to ask you this morning, can you relate to the fact that there are times when we lose sight of who we are as children of God, and there's a sense of almost a free fall through life? If you're a Christian, you don't ever have to know that feeling. You don't ever have to know that feeling. And now as a pastor, I have to also remind you that it's not a fall if you let go or if you jump. There are a lot of times we want to claim the status of victim of a fall, when in reality we're the ones who jumped. There are many of us who are just trying to get by, who find ourselves walking away from the truth and the love of Christ. We realize as we look around, geez, I'm hanging out with a bunch of dead carcasses. I'm feeding my soul and my mind and my life a bunch of junk, a bunch of gross stuff. It's because we've bought the lie that says you got to do your best just to survive in this life. It's a hard world out there, kid. If you don't do it on your own, nobody's going to help you. I was given that advice. Do you notice that when your focus is on survival, your focus is on self? I have to do this. I have to learn. I have to develop the skills. It's all up to me. Quick, use your ingenuity. That's not God's way. Survivors focus on self. Thrivers walk with the King. As we continue now to walk through the book of 2 Peter, and I know some of you are saying, walk? Would you call it walking, Pastor Jeff, as slow as we're going? Week number 5, and we're about to enter into verse number 3. This morning, we will look at verse number 3 and verse number 4, and I promise you, from here, we'll start to pick up speed. But let me just remind you, we started looking at the man, Simon Peter, and we saw that in Simon, we could relate. This guy was just an average, everyday guy who spent a lot of time doing wrong and not getting it right. But the call that Jesus put on his life promised him that he would be Peter, the rock. We saw in week number 2 the ministry of Peter. We saw that he has been called as an average, everyday person just like us with a sent, called message from Christ to go into the darkness, to be the church, if you will. We said, hey, that's our call too. We can relate. Week number 3, we opened up with the first verse, and we saw Simon Peter, a man with a healthy self-awareness, who recognized sometimes I can be bad and sometimes I can be good. I'm just a human on a journey doing the best I can as a called out disciple. He said, Simon Peter, somebody with a healthy self-awareness, a slave and a sent one from the anointed Messiah, Jesus the Christ. 2, and he made it very clear, he was speaking directly to those who believe. He said, to those who have a faith exactly the same as ours. So he's not talking to those who say they're Christians. He's talking to those who truly are biblical, the exact same faith-oriented believers. He said, those whose faith is exactly the same, where we see Jesus as God, as Savior, and as Christ. Last week, he began the message as we looked at verse 2. He said, week number 1, I want to show you that I understand where salvation comes from. It comes from Jesus and Jesus alone. Last week, we looked at verse 2, and he said, I want you to see the substance of what it is to be saved. And he said, grace and peace be multiplied to you. And we saw grace is God's unmerited favor. May you have God's blessing pouring over you day in and day out as a child of God. May you have God's peace. May you have harmonious relationships vertically, horizontally, internally, and in every situation. He showed us that this all comes as a gift to those who believe and receive Jesus as Lord and Savior.